Okay, I'd like to call the special council meeting to order for September 25th. I'd like to call the special council meeting to order. Council, thank you. We acknowledge that this land is the traditional territory of the Three Fires Confederacy of the First Nations, comprised of the Ojibwe, the Ottawa, and the Potawatomi peoples, and of the Huron-Wyandot peoples. We value the significant historical and contemporary contributions of local and regional First Nations and of all the original peoples of Turtle Island who have been living and working on the land from time immemorial. Any declarations of conflicts of interest from members of council? Seeing none, I need a mover for the special council meeting agenda. Deputy Mayor Shepley, Councillor McGuire-Blaze, any questions? All in favor? And that is carried. We need a mover and a seconder to go into the committee of the whole, and that our CAO suite be appointed as presiding officer for the committee of the whole. Councillor Mady, supported by Deputy Mayor Shepley. Any questions on that? All in favor, and that's carried. And if any members of the viewing audience notice a difference, we've just realigned our council chambers to get everybody on the top. So I'll pass it over to you, Doug. Good luck.
Thank you, Mayor Bondi. So council, tonight is our first committee of the whole meeting for council, and the goal is to have these meetings every 3 to 4 months. For tonight's meeting, we'll follow the same format as past committee of the whole meetings, where each item may be discussed up to 15 minutes, and the council who brought the item forward will provide a brief summary of what they would like to discuss. There will only be discussion on tonight's topics for tonight, but should council feel there's further direction, that item needs to be brought back at a regular council meeting. So to begin, the first item on our agenda tonight is Committee of Council Vacancies, which was brought forward by Mayor Bondi. So at this time, I'll turn it back over to Mayor Bondi to provide a summary of what you'd like to do.
Okay. Go sweet through you, just to council and administration, just looking for kind of an update on how many vacancies we have on our committees and how we can try to fill them with the majority of our terms still left. Thank you.
So with that, I'll turn it to our Deputy Clerk, Ms. Brown.
Chair Sweet. So currently we have 2 committees with vacancies. The Accessibility Committee has vacancy, and the ACT Committee has vacancy. The Santos Village, as you know, is newly appointed, and we're seeking accepting applications at this time. So typically what we do as the vacancies come up throughout the term of council, we'll advertise on social media, on our website, and then a lot of times too, the committee members themselves will advocate for people to come on board. And what we'll do too is we'll consult with the staff liaison of that committee to see the urgency, how the committee's operating, and the functionality of it. The last time we did an advertisement for any committee vacancies was in June of this year. We did the Arts, Culture, Tourism, Coan Park, Accessibility, and Heritage. And it looks like of those 4, there is 2 have remaining vacancies. Again, we're accepting applications for Santos Village as well as the accessibility. A couple things I wanted to talk about that is kind of new for this term of council, and I think we had probably back in 2022 after the election, I don't know if you guys recall, but we had spoke about doing a better job as far as training and onboarding all the committee members. So what we did at, I believe it was, I don't know if it was this year, I think, Doug, we offered 3 training sessions. So these onboarding type of sessions was myself, CEO Suite, and Brandy, our Manager of Human Resources. And we went through, from my point of view, I went through procedural matters, set expectations, highlighted, not the whole procedural bylaw, but what we expect as far as speaking through the chair, and just kind of best practices. Brandy went through some HR policies that pertain to committee members. The feedback was really well received. I think even Mr. Councillor Mady, your mother was there as well at one. And it was very well received, and we were very happy. It was very positive. What we're going to do going forward to support is we're going to offer a midterm refresher for all committee members. So in 2024, it won't be quite as detailed, but after that, we figure that's a good time because a lot of the members will have had a year or 2 under their belt, and they'll come likely with more questions. since that time, I've had a couple committees reach out to me and ask for individual training. So I've actually conducted committee-specific training, and those are more of the Committee of Adjustment, property, or not property standards, but Committee of Adjustment and drainage. Those are the, bigger ones that we really want to make sure that they're following the rules of procedure. So going forward, if you recall back, I think earlier this year, I can't remember the date, council had approved that the Committee of Adjustment would be live streaming. So so the training has been developed, and the training will be in November of this year, and it's going to highlight best practices, etiquette, expectations, all of those things that we want from our members as it being a permanent record of being live streamed. So I'm open to questions if anybody has any.
Questions of council on what was brought forward, or questions, Councillor Berby?
Thank you, through you, Chair. Did you say there's a vacancy? Did you mention Coan Park? I only heard you mention the two, and Coan Park does indeed have a vacancy.
Here's sweet. I don't have them indicated as having a vacancy, but I'll note that to contact you, and because I do have that they are a complete complement. So I will contact you after this meeting, and I'll figure out where the discrepancy is.
Any further questions from council on Committee of Council vacancies, suggestions? Councillor McGuire, please.
So I guess through the chair, sorry. How many vacancies are on the accessibility committee? How many is it one? Is it more than one?
Here, accessibility has 5. ACT has 2.
So, through the chair. So 5 and 2, that's quite a bit. Is it always low, and is there a reason for it being low? Maybe the accessibility committee, I don't know much about it, but maybe they don't have enough say, or they feel like being on this committee isn't worth their time, or like, do they have an opportunity? Yeah.
So through the chair, just to add some context, there are 12 openings in that committee. So 5 vacancies still means that there are 7 people in the committee. And what the deputy clerk does is she consults with the committee to ask them what the need is. And currently at this time, we understood that there wasn't a pressing need to fill those remaining 5 spots, that 7 people were good for now. But there is ongoing communication. And if we determine that we do need more, then we will go and try and get more to fill those 5 vacancies.
So thank you, through the chair. I would just say, I like the idea of in 2024 doing another check-in with the committees. I would like to send them like an anonymous, somehow have there be an anonymous survey that says, do you feel like your role is being fulfilled? Are you fulfilling a role? Are you fulfilled in this position? Because I think sometimes when you're on the committee, I know one of the committees I was on for a period of time, I felt like, why do we have this committee, and what is my purpose here? And I know you tried to do that with the onboarding, but once they're in it, they might feel differently. Like once they're in it, they might still feel that way. Like, what's my purpose? So I would like to maybe ask some of our volunteers or committee members that question and make sure that everyone's satisfied. Because if we're seeing low numbers, and we do see low numbers, or people don't sign on for another term, it could just be maybe they're not doing work like they thought they were going to, or being as active in the community as they thought they were going to be. And maybe we can just adjust some things and make them feel more active. Just a suggestion.
Thank you, and through you, Chair Sweet. So one of the feedbacks that I got on the striking committee too, was that for property standards, you have to be on the committee of adjustment first. But when people were signing up, there was nothing on our forms that indicated that. So maybe if we can add something there to indicate that if you want to be on property standards, you have to apply for committee of adjustment first. And then the vacancies right now, if we're going to be looking to fill the Santa's committee, the Santa's Village committee right now, are we going to be onboarding with that? If we're going to be doing the whole onboarding thing again, maybe it'd be a good time to run an ad and see if we can't get these other 7 people.
That's through the chair. I think the chair position on a lot of the committees are important. Maybe we should be taking a look at that position and making sure that the chairs understand what it means to be a chair. Are they delegating properly? Are they getting the most out of their team? Are they setting up committee members to succeed or fail? So maybe there could be some sort of a training session with the chairs of the various boards.
Great. So just on that, Councillor Garon, as part of the onboarding process, we did talk about the chair and the vice chair and the role that they play and the importance of that, and having to be very mindful when they're doing their elections, that they, that they give consideration to who they're electing, and in further to that, that the person who's accepting this nomination knows what they're getting into. We also sat with staff members who are on the committees and said, okay, let's, again, as we educate our staff, our committee members, let's make sure that they're fully aware what their role and responsibility is as well. So I think we can always do better. So I've made a note of that. Thank you.
Through the chair, do we have anything in place for, so chair gets elected and usually it's usually it's for a full term, I'm assuming. So is there a role, is there steps that can be taking place for committees to want to change that chair?
Chair. So yearly, the committees are required to set their meeting dates for the next year and hold an election. So chairs are for 1 year. So someone else can get a kick at the can, or if the person who's there can submit, you can nominate yourself as well. So that's a 1-year commitment, because someone going into it may not necessarily after a year want to continue. Or alternatively, there's someone else on the committee that, may have been new to it, and they've looked back and they're like, you know what, I think that's something I'd like to give a try. So.
I just want to add, Ms. Brown did raise it, but we also did recording secretary and staff liaison training, which is very beneficial too, so they know what their role is. Mayor Bonnie did mention, though, one thing we have to look at our committees, I'm not sure how we address it, is the time, right? Accessibility is during the day, and that could be a factor as well. So something we are going to have to look at moving forward. And if we do a survey, as Councillor McGuire-Blaise, maybe that's something, does this time work? Okay, any other questions on this topic? Seeing none. Oh, Councillor Verbeek.
Through you, Chair, and to you, Chair, maybe just an informal checkup by the staff liaison at the different committees. Set aside 15 minutes in the new business and say, I just want to bring this to your attention. We're looking for feedback. Sort of informal.
With that, we will move on to our second topic, ditch maintenance process, and that was brought forward by Councillor Verbeek. And if you can provide an update to the group.
Have notes, because when I put that in was a long time ago, and I think we covered it a lot in the last couple of weeks, but I just I again always have concerns about just clear cutting the ditches with the I still see trees in the rural area, on the rural roads and in the creeks And I just hate to see when that happens. And there's no way after storms, especially like right now, I hate to bring attention to this because our staff have done so well after these 3 major events. But where I am out in Ward 2, specifically like in 2 big places on my road, we pushed and pushed to get all the Phragmites took down, right? Because, for, the driving and the visibility in that, and our staff were out killing themselves doing that right before the storm hit. So now we've got all this fresh Phragmites and it's blocked up at all the drains, and we can't just be like, I wanted to start sending in reporter problems, but I don't want our staff to have to be running out with all this machinery to clean up all of these Phragmites that are piled at the drains when they're so, they're a little bit taxed with other things. So I just wondered if there's some way, like, they're out and about after these events and after big rain events, and not even if it's a big disaster level one. Could they kind of like make a map of where some of these big drains, especially after big cuttings in that, need, so that they can do it in a like map out a pattern and go about and do it, not go pick up this great big mess that's at one of the culverts on 8 and then get called back 2 days later because nothing's moving on the 9th because there's a hayfield in the drain. If as they're going about things after big rains, if they could just kind of map out a plan for when there's extra staff for it. Some of those things were my concerns, and I just wanted to open it up to administration and council to have this discussion. This was from, my past term, I had brought this up with just wanting to get the discussion going, and a lot of the things have been answered the first part of this term, but specifically the cleanup after the storms. I know that staff is really busy with that, but boy, I'm still seeing, like, I'm trying to get my husband to come on board with me to go clean out a couple of the big drains, because there's a lot of Phragmites just piled up and completely blocking them. And now they're full with all the plastic, which is another story, but that's because of blue boxes always blowing over. But anyway, I just wanted to get the conversation tonight and hear from others on it.
Open it up to any further questions. I'll go to Director Gerard, maybe kind of talk about the process in your phone.
Through the chair. So you are correct that we've been inundated with flooding and definitely all the windstorm events that we've had. But something that's important to note is that we have a significant amount of drains in the town. So without counting the roadside ditches, we have 550 kilometers of municipal drains. We only have 350 odd kilometers of roads. So we have more drains than we have roads in the municipality. And something that's important to note is that many of those drains, they run through private property. So there's a lot of times that we cannot control what happens on private property. We cannot be aware, we cannot access without permission. So, we do rely on people to report those issues to us through report a problem and let us know when those things happen. Of course, after a large flooding event or storm event of any nature, we get flooded with those as well. So, we do ask the public to be patient with us. We do receive those work orders. I can say, after a review today, we're still over 200 work orders to be completed from the past flooding event, which happened, a month ago as of today. So, so we do ask for that patience, but we do our maintenance as we need it, and we do rely on those things if there are specific issues with the drains.
Through you, Chair. Thank you so much, Director Gerard. And I guess I was just, because I didn't bring my notes, I wasn't clear at that specific piece. I was just wondering if afterwards, so that you're not, like you say, this time around, there's over 200 reporter problems. And I had several that I could have, but I just didn't want to inundate you with them as far as those go. I just wonder if at some point, someone that's out on the road anyway could map that out and then just, go back on one day and do them all so that you're not having to go out and do one day and then get called to another, or do you you do it that way already and I don't know that? Or like, do you keep do you keep a log and then go out and do the drains every 2 days a month or something? Because they do get piled up, as you know, especially after fresh cuttings, right? That's one of the biggest contributors to those bogged down drains.
We do actively try and monitor our drainage system. However, to have somebody actively go and walk 550 kilometers with the drain would be extremely taxing on operations. So we do rely very much on those reported problem tickets and people letting us know. But with that being said, municipal drainage is a unique thing when it comes to drainage in a municipality, and it is user-based. So, we do actively look at what has to be maintained. When we mow it, we ensure that, we try and keep the clippings as clean as possible, remove what we can. But ultimately, Phragmites is an invasive species that grows really fast and not something that's easily rid of. So it is something that's very challenging for not only the town of Essex, but this is a very common thing throughout our region.
I think no matter how perfect our drainage systems were in the last flood, we would have had areas that flooded no matter what. But I'm just wondering, in terms of staff workload and capabilities, is this something, because I don't know, you could just shake your head. Is it Public Works that actually cleans the drains? So no? Okay, so I'm just wondering if it's something that we actually think of doing every other year, like getting a contracted service in, and then we rest assured that they've all been maintained. I'm just spitballing ideas on how to not take our staff away from all the other things that they need to do. And I know that would have a cost to it as well, but it might be at the point where residents are saying hey, we want to pay for that because we want to ensure that all of our drains are cleaned every second year.
Director Greg. Chair, we do contract out the actual brushing of the ditches. So mowing the ditches themselves are contracted out. We spend tens of thousands of dollars. I believe we're in the ballpark of $80,000 a year just to mow down all of the drains, and that doesn't take into account mowing the roadside ditches and the mowing on the side of the roads that our Public Works team does. So yeah, it's a significant cost to do that. So if we were looking to up the level of service, that would have a budgetary impact.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. So the Phragmites, do we have a plan in place for dealing with invasive species like that, where we actually actively try to get rid of them, or do we just go with a cutting method for those?
So we just cut. The only truthful way to get rid of it is to use an actual spray, a chemical spray. However, we're not allowed to do that in water courses. So it makes it kind of challenging. So we have, this is an issue that is recognized by not only the region and our municipalities, but by the province of Ontario as well. So there are things that, the province is looking at as well to try and help with the mitigation of Phragmites. They did release a funding opportunity this year, to which the town of Essex actually applied for. But we were unsuccessful, unfortunately, on trying to remove some of those Phragmites in the town. But we'll continue to look at those options available to us, and we'll continue to work with the province until we can figure out a way to address those, invasive species.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Yeah, I believe in one of the wetlands, IRCA's actually trying a bio solution. A bug that only eats Phragmites. So hopefully that works, and maybe we could bring that into the town too. The other thing, during this recent flooding and talking with a lot of the residents, the people's understanding of a municipal drain and their responsibilities within it. We're having a lot of new people move into our area from cities, from urban centers. And they don't necessarily know what their responsibilities are inside of a municipal drain. Is there any type of information packets that the town has that we can give to these people? Or maybe we could schedule some open houses to just get the information back out there on what people should be looking for when they move into an area with a municipal drain?
Yes, we do. We have OMAFRA actually, so the Ministry of Agriculture and Food, they actually do have information packages that the town utilizes as well. And we do share those with people. The thing, it's like you mentioned, the thing is with municipal drainage is nobody really understands what it is until they're kind of hit with it. And at that time, we do make an effort to try and communicate exactly how it works, providing fact sheets, providing everything we can for them to understand exactly how that system works. So we do have those here. So if there is ever a time that you have residents for that kind of thing, you can certainly direct them to our website where we have a little bit.
Director Gerard, any further questions from council on this item? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to our third topic, urban chickens, and that's brought forward by Councillor McGuire Blaze.
Thank you through the chair. So I've had, I wanted to bring it to council to get your ideas because I've had residents for urban chickens and against urban chickens. So I did a little bit of research on my own, and as per the Windsor Essex Health Unit, urban chickens can be a sustainable food system. They provide fresh eggs to families who might not be able to afford groceries, especially with the grocery bills getting so high. And chickens, after they are done laying their eggs, make good for good stewing chickens. Some of the recommendations that I've read from other municipalities are they provide permits for these chickens, a total of 4 per household or per square footage of property. And they must be kept in a chicken coop. Chicken coop that's a reasonable size for 4 chickens. The town would have to come up with a plan to implement how they're going to get rid of the feces of the chickens. No roosters allowed. You cannot slaughter the chickens in your backyard. So some of the municipalities, such as St. Thomas, just as recently as April 2023, decided to go ahead with urban chickens. They put a price tag of $100 for an annual permit on chickens. And they also have, if we're interested in looking further into it, the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Affairs provided resources, and the Canadian Food Inspection Agency also provided info. One of the most negative things about having urban chickens is obviously the bird flu. So avian flu is a big negative to having it in the urban area. But I think that if we did it properly and we only provided X amount of permits within the town limits and had it, X amount of chickens per square footage, that way you're not saying, because there's some properties with 3 households, that would be 12 chickens on a property. We don't necessarily want to see that, but we could say 4 chickens per, 60 by 30 foot property. So I just wanted to hear what the rest of council had to say about that, what your thoughts were on it. I'm kind of divided. I do see the benefits of having urban chickens, especially with the cost of groceries. 4 chickens would provide you with 4 eggs per day. It also could provide an income of up to $12 a week if you wanted to sell it. But then there is some negatives. Typically, laying chickens do not make noise. They're a fairly quiet animal. Roosters, peacocks would definitely not be allowed, but that would be written in the permit. So those are my thoughts.
Before I open up, we did some research back in the spring, so just on some local municipalities. So Lakeshore at the time was a no, but they're in the process of a draft bylaw, which would have hens only up to 5. Permit was not required, backyard only. They must be registered with Chicken Farmers of Ontario Family Food Program. Tecumseh did a 2-year pilot program, but rescinded the program in March 2022, citing resources due to staff resources for licensing and enforcement, and residents also complain about rodents. Then the following Amherstburg, Kingsville, LaSalle, Leamington, and Windsor were all no. So I can open up the council. I'm not sure if Director Chadwick or Mr. Carter had any other comments. Director Chadwick?
Thank you, Chair Sweet. Just to clarify, just for information purposes, the current zoning bylaw does not permit livestock or chickens in residential zoning districts, which is why they are essentially where complaints are driven from and what the enforcement would entail is under the zoning bylaw. A standalone bylaw is something that is what I'm hearing Councillor McGuire Blaze indicate for licensing as well as to establish. But certainly, just to clarify that they are permitted in agricultural districts, but this topic being urban chickens, understood that the reason why they're not permitted for clarity purposes is just to clarify rather that it's because of the zoning bylaw.
Mayor Bondi.
Sweet. I am open-minded to having the conversation. I think food sustainability is something that I'd like to see, but I think it has to also be done right. And I don't know what that looks like yet. It hasn't really been high on the radar, but I really think it's a lot more humane to have a couple chickens in your backyard than the alternative. I don't plan on doing it myself. I don't even really like eggs, but I think that people should be able to, if they have the land and can do it, and they have if they're good chicken owners. But I think it's a staff resource thing. So I think we'd have to talk about how we're going to do it and if this is a priority to do and how do we break even, because even like charging somebody $100 is actually, I think it's kind of a lot too, like for chickens. So I don't know if there's something we can do to gauge public interest on this. Like, I really do think it's a 50-50 issue. So I'd like to put it out there to the community and say like, hey, what are your thoughts? And a lot of people really have chickens already. Like, I've seen it campaigning. A lot of people have chickens. They just don't have roosters. So if you're watching this, do not ever get a rooster, because then once we know you have chickens, we have to take away your chickens. So just don't do it.
Any other council members' comments? Councillor Beek.
Through you, Chair. I'm also very glad that we're having this conversation right now. And I'm also on the fence. I think, you know, chickens in a rural setting, ideal. People that live out there, they expect the noise and the smells. People that live in town, not so much. I'd like us to find a way to run a pilot project, perhaps. I too say, you know, like everyone I've spoken to, no more than 4 or 5, definitely no roosters. There has to be a coop and there has to be a fence and some form of registry and accountability. Again, then there's this, there's definitely going to be a cost because we would have to call upon administration to deal with this registry and such. Is there a way that if they register as a hen owner, they're then they, you know, get a how to be a good hen owner, chicken keeper guideline, something like that? I'm just glad we're having the conversation, and I would be in the future, if we, you know, look a little deeper, I'd be in support of a pilot program. We do know that unlike some issues, when we make decisions here, we can't go back on them. That, like Tecumseh already showed us, we could go back after you know, a trial period. But yeah, I'd like to see us look into it a little further.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So 3 things. We have a livestock bylaw. I'm assuming it was developed for a reason. I'd like to hear a little bit more about that, some history if we have it. We are aware of some chickens in residential areas. I'd like to know how many we feel we have chickens. Like, is it 1 in Essex Center? Is it 5 across the municipality? I'd like to hear from bylaw on what the main complaints we're getting from neighboring residents.
There's 3 basic zoning districts we get complaints. We have urban residential is 1, rural residential, which is 2, and agricultural. Believe it or not, we get complaints in all 3. Our existing bylaw does not allow urban residential livestock. Chickens, roosters are designated as livestock animals under OMAFRA. In the agricultural area, we get people complaining about free range chickens, which means they can run around anywhere, including the streets. Pleasant Valley is rural residential. It's residential, but they're allowed to have livestock. Our bylaw pertains specifically to urban residential. We received this calendar year approximately 8 complaints, and in all 3 zone districts, but the vast majority have been urban residential. And the complaints have been based on noise, primarily noise, running around in neighboring properties, and smell. The feces of chickens are quite powerful, and the bulk of our complaints are the smell. We have, out of those 8 complaints, 1 was designated under the Disabilities Act as ESA, emotional support animal. We have to sort of somewhat recognize that because it's provincial law. But the main complaints are in the urban residential and via roosters making the noise early hours in the morning. But that's about it in terms of complaints. Report a problem or call-ins is a total of 8.
Oh,
Yeah. Okay, so that's one. I was wondering about if we are, how many have we identified in rural settings? And I want to go back to the bylaw was probably here before any administration was here, but the bylaw was developed livestock for urban residential for a reason. Just wanted, if you could just add a little bit to what some of those reasons would have been other than what Mr. Carr's already said.
Is the bylaw was passed to make it simple in terms of enforcement. That urban residential, it's livestock animals, have it be chickens or any livestock, is not permitted. That's predominantly why that bylaw was passed, to make it easier for enforcement.
Councillor Meady?
You, Chair. Yeah, it's great to have this conversation. And I was surprised by the zoning that, so rural residential, you're still allowed to have livestock, but just urban residential, you're not allowed to. And urban residential, is that just for like pretty vague or, general terms, where we have our like Colchester Center sign, our Harrow Center signs, our Essex Center signs, those are going to be our urban residential. And outside of that's going to be rural. Is that
Basically it. The urban centers are the centers themselves. Again, I use Pleasant Valley as an example. We have a lot more other than Pleasant Valley that are rural residential that are permitted to have chickens or any livestock, but not in intensified livestock. In essence, Pleasant Valley, you can have horses, chickens, goats, but they cannot be intensive livestock. Where agricultural, you're allowed to have more than, say, 10 horses. Where in rural residential, you got to be below 10. That's the only distinguishing factor between rural residential and agricultural. This is the intensification of livestock.
Hammond, Deputy Mayor Shepley, and then Councillor Allard will be the last one on this topic.
Yes, through you, Chair. I'd like to add on to what Mr. Guerin Councillor Guerin was saying in regards to the bylaw. Do we have any kind of time frame as to when that bylaw was instilled? I remember growing up with chickens, and I had to have a rooster chase me across every time I cut across his yard, but I don't know when that bylaw would have been enforced to prohibit the use of chickens in town, especially since we had a hatchery. Any kind of timeline there?
Chair Sweet, Thank you, Chair Sweet. The current zoning bylaw was adopted into 2010. We can certainly look into any past zoning bylaws to determine whether or not chickens were permitted in the zoning bylaw in urban residential zoning districts, but the 2010 zoning bylaw since then has prohibited them in residential zoning districts. As far as some of the reasoning behind it, I think our manager of bylaw enforcement, chief building official, is correct to point out that it's somewhat due to bylaw enforcement, but it's also important to note that there are minimum distance separations for a large quantity of livestock as well, and that MDS is established through legislature, or rather policies under OMAFRA as well. So those minimum distances are established in our zoning bylaw, but again, that's for a large quantity of livestock.
Mayor Shepley.
Thank you, through the chair. Oh, chickens. I'm probably gonna lose a few of my chicken fans out there because I don't understand why anybody, I get the reasoning for wanting to have them in town. I would never support that this would be okay. I think it would be taxing for our staff. Our bylaw officers have plenty to do without having to worry about chickens in people's backyards that are allowed to be there, not allowed to be there. If they have a rooster, I think just as all kinds of wrong. The potential for disease alone should be a reason to say no. And if we're gonna allow livestock, where does it end? Well, why not allow a cow in the backyard so they can get their milk? Livestock's meant to be on a farm, not in town. It's never was intended to be in town as a town animal or as a pet. I understand. I've never heard of an ESA as a chicken. What happens if a rooster becomes an ESA? Do we have to allow that at that case? I mean, there's got to be some rhyme and reason for what we're willing to consider. And to me, the smell, the responsible chicken owner, which I'm sure there are some out there. I'm not going to deny that people don't look after their animals and love them probably better than their own children. But the fact of the matter is not everybody's going to get in the backyard and keep it clean and not have it smelly. And I don't want to put any of our residents through that, or our bylaw or anyone else. I think it's a wrong-headed decision to even consider it. I'm completely against it, and I don't think there will ever be an argument that changes my opinion on this. That's it.
You and Councillor Allard, you have the last word on this topic.
Through the chair, I'm just wondering, rural residential, how many chickens are they allowed? Is there a number?
Everything is, the OMAFRA, through the MDS, minimum distance separation, every livestock animal is listed, and they have a quantity of that certain type of animal to be an animal unit. For example, a horse is one animal unit. 400 chickens is one animal unit. That's just an example. 250 baby pigs are one animal. Adult pigs, 100 is one animal. So it varies from animal to animal, livestock animal. But we've never run across in a urban residential area where someone had vast majority to equal an animal unit that we would have to kick in minimum distance separation criteria. That's just as an example.
Director Chadwick.
Thank you. Just a quick note, and to Councillor Allard, it also depends on the size of the property. So number of units, number of animal units is also permitted by number of size of the property.
Thank you. That was good questions, good conversation. So we'll go on to our next one, multi-level housing development incentives brought forward by Councillor Hammond.
Chair, just wondering if the town has any type of incentives that we can use to promote multi-level housing development, especially in Harrow. We got some properties that seemed prime for it. I'm just wondering if there's anything that the town can do to maybe get someone attracted to developing in there. I know that the province is trying to get some initiatives going. I'm just wondering if the town has anywhere that they might be able to do such things. Maybe first of all, just designating these areas as attractive places to maybe make that development and perhaps advertise them as such. I don't know. I'm just hoping that maybe we can get something moving towards there to get some of these buildings going up rather than taking up all our farm property.
Hammond, and maybe to start, I'll turn it to Director Chadwick to kind of discuss what the town is currently doing there through the province.
Thank you, CEO Sweet. Just for a point of clarification to Councillor Hammond, by the term multi-level housing, are you referring to multi-stories and multi-residential, say apartment or condominium style? You. Okay, so the town currently has multiple incentives, as well as through legislation, of course, under the More Homes Built Faster Act. So the few that come to mind are the development charge exemptions for affordable nonprofit rental housing, and that could be in the form of multi-residential, multi-story apartments. And those DC exemptions, although at this moment we don't have the provincial definition of attainable or affordable at this moment, it's difficult at this point to determine what is and what is not. However, our DC bylaw does have that definition by identifying provincial grants and provincial nonprofits that are tied to that particular development. So that is an exemption that's currently in effect. There are also, of course, the nonprofit housing exemptions. Additional dwelling units are, of course, exempt, as well as some form of incentive, we'll call it, in the form of installment payments of DCs. So rental housing that is multi-story would be eligible for a payment schedule to pay DCs up to 6 years. So that is something if someone is, developers coming forward and has plans to develop and has that DC charge, then it could be something that is deferred, of course, with the, sorry, what is it called? The not the tax, but the, oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank to Kate. Maybe she can help me. There's something that is eligible to be paid every year. Kate? Payment that is also required. As far as other things that the town has control over, there are plans right now for us to look at properties to intensify, and that includes in our urban centers. We're mandated by the province to look at intensification in our existing settlement areas prior to ever expanding that settlement area. So both urban centers, Harrow and Essex Center, looking at where are the best properties, where are adjacent land use is compatible. Also, where are, people able to have, walkable services that are nearby. And then the municipal services, are they available as well to intensify those lands? So we're currently undergoing that new official plan and undergoing that exercise to determine where are some of those spots that we're looking at gently intensifying existing properties that, potentially are not, say, viable as maybe the designation is institutional, maybe it's commercial, but looking at, what is the highest and best use and potentially redesignating for residential, for multi-residential. And then lastly, we do understand that it's also council's priority, one of the council's priorities in the strategic plan, so that it is something that we're looking at in the urban centers as well.
Councillor Hammond?
Yeah, is there any room there for developments that don't fall under the attainable, affordable, or nonprofit? For maybe just a regular renter that is looking to move into the area?
Thank you, CEO Sweet. So although the current DC bylaw does exempt multi-residential DCs, that DC bylaw does expire in 2024. So the DCs are currently exempt for multi-residential, whether or not they're attainable or affordable or not. That DC bylaw is currently under review. We are doing a background study and will be proposing a new DC bylaw in 2024 before the expiry date in August of 2024. Council will be faced with that decision. Do you want to continue to waive DCs for multi-res, whether or not they're attainable or affordable or market driven? So that's for council to decide. In my experience as well, we have seen other incentive programs that are out there for multi-res in the form of community improvement plans, so CIP programs that are geared towards maybe specific areas, and specific grant programs where, for example, it's geared towards multi-residential development. So that's something for council to consider, and it doesn't necessarily need to be just DC bylaw, or sorry, DC charges only.
I'll go to Director Drusevich, then Councillor Guerin.
Through the chair, from administration's viewpoint, we always just want to remind council that should we provide elective exemptions on our DC, we are required to fund that from other sources. So essentially, it means potentially the rest of the tax base has to fund that waiver. So it's always an analysis and a decision that council should, it has an impact to the rest of the tax base.
Guerin?
To the chair, to Director Chadwick, just want to make sure I got this right. When you said that you can defer DC payments for up to 6 years, interest-free, was that only for multi-level development? Or is that for any development?
So just for point of clarification, it would not be interest-free. So we would apply interest to it over the 5-year payment. And it is currently only specified for rental housing at this point, not any development. So it has to be defined as a rental housing development to receive that deferral.
So like a Weston Apartments, that type of a case would be able to. Now, can a developer push the development fees back 5-6 years and sell in the meantime and still be entitled to the development, the waiver, or would the new buyer have to pay for the development fees of the day? Yeah.
So within bylaw 1850, it's all determined at the date of building permit issuance. So depending on when whichever developer decided to build, they would be it would be the development charges in effect at that date that they drew the building permit. So if there was a waiver when they drew the permit for the bylaw, they would receive that. Should they wait 5 years and we eliminate that type of waiver, they may not receive that.
Bondi and Councillor McGuire-Blaze.
This is a conversation that we had approximately a year ago, October 3rd, 2022, when we were reviewing our waivers. And I printed off this report because you probably wouldn't have seen it, Councillor Hammond, where we talked about how much of a tax increase we would need to have on our tax base right now for continue to waive the fees. And we're looking at like a 7% tax increase if we keep it status quo. So I think we need to talk about this in budget if we want to do this, because I could see us, I could see supporting doing it if we're going to get, low income housing that we very much need. But for example, like the apartment that we have here in Ward 1, to give developers like that a break, they're just charging $2,200 to $2,700 to $2,900 a month in rent. Like they're not passing along the savings to the people that are moving in there. So I think that's hard. And we kind of reached a point where at the end of last term, we couldn't do things we wanted to do in the town because we didn't have the development charges. So I look forward to seeing the bylaw come back, and if we want to talk about it in budget, I think we can, but there's a huge cost to it. So I'm gonna give you this.
Okay. Thank you through the chair. I don't know that we need to provide developers with an incentive. I would not be for adding financial incentives to any developer. They're already making money off of a development. What I think we could do to entice people, developers to come build in Essex is make Essex look more enticing. So make it more sellable. Not that we're not sellable now, but we just, I think, need to maybe pivot a bit and show what we have. Change maybe in our communications if we feel like we're not developing the way that we should be. Maybe reaching out to developers and telling them what we're looking to do and seeing how we can work with them to maybe change sorry, drawing a blank, how from a residential to a commercial building, which we have been doing in Essex Center. We just did it for that commercial building on Wilson, I think. So I think that maybe not giving a financial incentive to developers, but maybe making Essex more sellable would be the thing. So that would be trying to get different businesses here. You don't want to build apartment building if there's no place for people to walk and get a coffee or to walk and grab their cigarettes. So trying to pivot that way and selling it that way and think what's to do in Essex. Where is there to shop? Where is there to eat? What is there to do recreationally? Are there paths for you to go for a walk? If we're looking at building multi-unit housing, multi-level housing, we need to be able to provide all of those things to make it affordable. We also need to provide transportation, some kind of transportation so they can get to and from work. These are all going to sell Essex. So what you need is to have Essex be sellable, not so much provide financial incentives and removing fees and levies or whatever it is. What you need to do is make it sellable. And I think Essex is doing a really great job. We have a lot of programs and we are working on walkways and making the town more walkable. And we are trying to get some more businesses, especially in Essex Center and in Colchester, in Harrow, the new streetscape. So we are working towards that, but I think that's what's going to bring development here, not so much a financial incentive.
On the topic, Councillor Hammond.
Thank you, Chair, through you. One last question regarding development fees. Mr. Gerard, say a multi-level unit with 40 units in it, what would the development charges be in relation to those for 40 houses or 40 dwellings?
Director Chadwick.
Thanks, CEO Sweet, to Councillor Hammond. It's based, I mean, we can pull it today, a number of units. It's of course based on the ward as well. There's the water and sanitary. Is it something that I can calculate at this very moment? I'm not sure, but we could certainly.
That's to all council, just for information purposes. Okay, we'll move on to our next subject, which is speed enforcement initiatives through Mayor Bondi.
CAO Suite, since the new term of council, the Police Service Board has been really active in using the email on the Police Service Board website. So we're marketing it out to people in our community to send in their problem areas, and administration, I believe, is working with the OPP, and I'm not sure if you could tell us what we're working on. And Director Gerard has something really cool, the cool information from the Black Cat boxes. I'm not sure if he could show us, but.
So before I forward it, yeah, so for council, we basically have 3 tools right now in our toolbox. We have the speed trailer, We have black cat boxes, which go up in post. And then we also have speed radar that are also on the post, the smaller ones. So we have basically all three of those in place. And what we do is we'll take stats from those and we're just starting to compile them. If we see there's an area that needs enforcement, we meet with the OPP and they meet with their officers for speed enforcement in those areas. So these are things that the previous council asked us to purchase. It's kind of in the last month that all three are in effect. So maybe Director Gerard can expand a little bit more on that.
So through the chair, yeah, so kind of going to what Mayor Bondi had mentioned, I'll go into a little bit, but basically in addition to anything that is brought up at Police Service Board, the town has also implemented a basically like a speeding traffic study program throughout the town. So basically what we do is we do traffic studies from the month of May to the month of October. While the weather's good, those are ideal traffic study times. Obviously, aside from the speed trailer, which was managed by our OPP with depending on where we needed to implement that. We have the black cat boxes, which as part of the program are rotated throughout the town, whether it be through complaints that we receive from administration or some areas that we'd like to investigate. So all three of those black cat boxes are rotated through both the urban center and the rural areas, all through town. What we do is we take that data and we actually run it through a new software that we invested in this year. And that's what that software does. It allows it crunches the data for us instead of us having to do it manually like we've done in the past. And it'll actually give us all the statistics, and including times that are the most ideal for enforcement. So for instance, if we find a road that has a high level of speeding on it, we can share information with our OPP local detachment to say, the speeding is the worst between this time and this time. It's usually on Mondays to Fridays or on Saturdays and Sundays. So we can pinpoint actual ideal times to enforce those roads. So that is all shared with the OPP. As the CAO mentioned as well, we have 2 temporary variable speed signs that council approved us to purchase, which are up on Gesso Side Road right now. That was the first place we decided to locate. And as part of the traffic study program, we've implemented essentially that those signs will follow the black cat boxes where it's identified that a high level of speeding or enforcement is required. So as a step preliminary to notifying the OPP, we'll actually put those signs up to educate the public on what that speed limit is. And then as our CAO mentioned, and Mayor Bondi mentioned, there are a lot of things happening at the Police Service Board. There's a lot of improvements happening there in terms of enforcement and receiving complaints about speeding. So, encouraging the public to report all of those issues and perceived speeding in those neighborhoods will help us to further develop this traffic study program. So people are definitely encouraged to either contact the town or the Police Service Board directly.
Thank you, Director Gerard. Council, any comments on any of that? Councillor Allard?
Is there residents all over town are saying, we'd like to have this road slower, that road slower? Does it have to go through a study to figure out that, hey, this road needs to be slower just for the aspect the houses are closer to the road or anything like that?
Through the chair, in my time here, we've actually taken had a policy approved by council. It's called Establishing Speed Limits Within the Town of Essex. That policy actually states the process and how the town sets speed limits in the town. So if there is a request to have a road reviewed for speed limit, it would go through that policy where we would conduct a traffic study to determine if the speed limit on that road is appropriate or not. If it needs to be decreased, we'll do so. If it stays the same, it'll stay the same, but it'll all follow that policy.
Mayor Shepley.
Through the chair, just a question for Director Gerard, if possible. When we were at AMO, the signs that we purchased, they were able to log right into our signs and through those signs, they were able to tell us what the average speed was and if there was, how many speeders were. Is that something that we're following as well as, I know we have the black cats for doing it secretively, but I'm just wondering if we're actually looking at those signs to see what the rate is out on that road, if that's something we're watching.
The chair, so with the purchase of those speed signs, they did give us a 1-year free trial on that live database. So it is something that we're utilizing. We are trying to have those variable speed signs follow the Black Cat devices because the Black Cat devices provide a baseline for that road. They tell us exactly what's happening on the road without knowledge. And then once the actual temporary variable speed signs are up, we can tell if it's working or not. So we can say, compare the data from the objective baseline data compared to the effectiveness of the sign. The other thing that we're looking at too is how effective and for how long is that sign effective. So our plan with the signs once they come down from Gesto is to look at, when did we notice people were just starting to speed again once they realized that the signs were there permanently? Are they effective for 2 weeks, 1 month, 3 months? So that's why we decided to leave those signs up for the remainder of the season to determine the effectiveness.
Just if we see that there's an issue in an area I don't think that's a community safety zone where it's happening. I know just around the corner it is. Has administration looked at, or has it been considered putting? I think I'm not sure if I'm correct on this, but we're allowed to use speed enforcement cameras potentially in our community safety zones. Has that been something we've ever looked at? Just I think we do get a lot of complaints in those areas, especially, and it's something that maybe I think would be worth looking into and for the future. I just didn't know if administration had looked at that at all.
We did have some conversations with the council in the last term regarding automated speed enforcement. There are definitely a lot of different models to that. There's some where you purchase the infrastructure and it becomes permanent. There's some that have like a lease program where they rent you the automated speed enforcement, but they collect the revenue from the speeding tickets and different things like that, red light cameras, all those different things. There didn't really seem to be much of an appetite from the previous council, mostly because the cost was very great. The other thing that's been kind of brought to our attention is that all of the speeding tickets need to be processed in Toronto, and Toronto doesn't really have much capacity to take on additional speed enforcement and issue tickets. We also need to have I forget what the title is, but essentially somebody that would represent us from a Provincial Offences Act perspective, which we would have to hire out. So there is a pretty great cost to that. You are correct that the legislation now doesn't allow automated speed enforcement outside of community safety zone. However, council does have the authority to make community safety zones. There is a community safety zone policy that was approved by council, which is also something that can be requested as well. But yeah, there are quite a few challenges. If council was looking to implement something like that, we would have to investigate it pretty thoroughly. That we'd probably need to do it through some type of report or something along those lines.
Any other questions, council members? We will go on to our next item, which is report a problem from Councilor McGuire Blaze.
Thank you through the chair. So this one and the next one kind of go hand in hand, but and I've said it before, I just would like to have an open conversation about it and see how we can make report a problem. I think report a problem is working for our residents. I'm not so sure it's working for at least me as a counselor, and I'm not sure about the rest of you. For me, I find it difficult when a resident will reach out to me. They will say, this is my problem. I'll tell them to report the problem. But once they report the problem, I can't follow up on the problem. I would like to be able to, because then they'll reach back and they'll say, well, no one got back to me, or they said this and this, and that's wrong. Sometimes the resident, not always, but sometimes the resident's not saying the whole, what is all been said by our administration. Sometimes we're only getting, 10 words and administration has provided 100 words. So I would like it to be, I would like to be able to see the report a problem. I would like to be able to be notified, or at least to have the resident be given an option to notify me on all of the notes that are taken in the report of problem. I know that our administration gets it. They can put notes in and you can go back in and you can see the notes and you can update the file. But I would like to know that for myself. There has been issues where a resident has reached out to another counselor or someone on this council. That counselor is working on it. Maybe they're not getting the answer as fast as they would like. So then they reach out to me thinking, well, that person's useless. I'm not getting the answer that I want. They reach out to me. So now there's two of us working on it, plus administration, because there's a reporter problem. And none of us know, because we don't know that it's happening. If we had a way to go, okay, 241 Charles Avenue, and I could just go into the program and look up 241 Charles Avenue, which is my address. I'm not giving away anybody else's. 241 Charles Avenue has reported a problem. And I can now see, okay, well, Councillor Guerin just talked to this person 2 weeks ago, and he talked to Director Gerard as well a week ago. I can then say, well, you've already talked to these two people, they're working on it. I would like to see something like that. I know that's going to be part of the budget. I know that it's a program that we need to work on. I'd like to hear what my fellow councillors think, because for me, I find I'm getting calls from Ward 2, Ward 3, Ward 4. I'm getting calls from all of them, and I don't know what's been happening.
Just as an update to council, one thing, and I think every council member has been asked by the resident, if I submit a report of problem, is it anonymous, right? Because they're worried about repercussions and all that. So we always tell them it's anonymous. So we have to be sensitive to that. And you're correct, Councilor McGuire Blaze. We have something that'll be in next year's budget, draft budget, and we're currently going through some demos. Some of the things is high level I've seen where you can put in that number and it will show you the history of it. So if a resident would give you that number, you would have that ability. So we realize that there are flaws in our system. And I agree, if there's feedback that we can get from council, it helps us even more when we're looking at these software programs, kind of what the scope and what we want them to do. Deputy Mayor Shepley.
Through the chair. This is, I kind of got a twofold on this one because it will involve bylaw a little bit. When we get a reporter problem, for instance, it's a parking issue or something of that nature, and it's an ongoing one where we get reporter problem in an area where there's a lot of issues. And so like for my example, what I looked at was even the McDonald's out on the highway, there's like probably 35 no parking signs, and yet I see trucks pulled over getting their coffee every morning. So obviously there was an issue there that somebody decided they had to put all those signs up. I'm just wondering, when we do get these reporter problems and it's in an area that's happening time and time again, do we then maybe have our bylaw officers, while they're out and about, do a tour just to zip through the area to make sure that those things are being abided, or to have a check to see if those issues are continuing to be a problem when we know that there's been several complaints in an area, for example. And my other one would be, sometimes when we do a reporter problem, I know, for instance, on the lights in Harrow that aren't, there's reasons that they're not fixed yet, but it would be good that if we got a notice as to what's going on, and we do, and maybe we put it out to our residents as well, so that they understand that you did do your reporter problem and it's being looked at and it's not been forgotten. It's just gonna, unfortunately, sometimes these things take weeks, months to be addressed. Thanks.
Before I turn it to Mr. Carter, on your second question for lights, probably over the last 4 months, we have worked with ELK to come up with this system, because we would see a gap where it'd go in our reporter problem system. It would automatically go to ELK, but we weren't getting feedback. So we've now worked with the board and the management team there where there is a system in place. So hopefully those answers back to the resident, even council members, can be in a more timely fashion. So we realize that, and hopefully that helps. Your first question, I'll turn it over to Mr. Carter.
Your chair, in terms of parking, we are more proactive now that we have after hours by law enforcement for such a case of no parking signs. During the business hours with one bylaw officer, we have to prioritize. If we get a lot of complaints regarding parking, not a lot, if we get a complaint, we'll try our best to fit that in deal with that day. Day to day, it's a fluid exercise of what is our priority for that day, depending on the severity of the complaint. So basically, now that we have after hours, that is more of proactive enforcement. We have most of our complaints regarding parking is in Essex Town Center right now. We have not assumed that. I've instructed our bylaw officers to just enforce handicap zones or in front of fire hydrants. We do have signage up on both sides of the road, and they are still parking on both sides of the road. I feel that it's best that we wait till we have put that forward to legal to our clerk's department in terms of that enforcement. Once we get that answer in terms of issuing those tickets, will they hold water or not? We'll cross that bridge at that time, but that is something that's being reviewed right now.
Thank you. Through the chair, my final question would be just based on the anonymity of the reports. I get a lot of residents asking us to do the report for them because they don't want to put their name on it. Doesn't matter how many times we assure them that their name isn't given out. I think that I'm wondering if there's a way for them to do a report a problem where they don't have to actually put their their name on it, where that can then be addressed, and it would maybe it ease them to realize that there's no way that it could get out, because for us to keep reporting it for them, I don't know that that's always the answer.
Excuse me, through the chair, you can report anonymously. However, unfortunately, the way that our computer system works, it doesn't allow it to be anonymous if you do it through our website. But if you call in, you can report anything anonymously. So if you call during regular business hours between 8:30 and 4:30.
Chadwick?
Thank you, CO Suite. However, under property standards, it's a bit different, where we are laying a potential charge down the road if there is non-compliance or non-voluntary compliance. We do in fact need a name and address of the complainant should we ever go down that route of legal and litigation matters.
Yeah, through the chair. Everything Councilmember Goyer-Blaze said is how I feel too. I think we're gonna hopefully get there. I think the reporter problem has really helped once we got it, but with that, at times it seems like our residents who were telling them do a report a problem, they feel like we're fluffing them off. That's the biggest challenge we all have, right? And when we can't really get into the weeds of it and what the complaint is, or that there even was a complaint, I find myself doing work that, Katie's probably already done or somebody else already done. So that's really the big challenge is. I want to talk about the couple things, the anonymous thing. When you say anonymous, somebody goes online, they don't have to give their name or their address. They can just report a problem. Is that what you mean by anonymous? Or you mean by once they give that information that they put on there, is Director Gerard only able to see the ones that go to his department, or can they all see everyone's?
Councilor Guerin, when it's anonymous, as Director Gerard mentioned, through the website, we need that information. If they want to remain anonymous where you don't know their name, they could call into our face the front desk and give the information that way. And sorry, your second question? Oh, sorry, I remember. No, it directly goes. So if they select a road, a pothole, or a tree branch down, or whatever, it goes directly just to that department. They're the only ones that could see it. I do have the ability, if council contacts me, I need to follow up, then I can get them at that time. But otherwise, it's just the department who it's affecting.
I'm having Katie's problem.
Okay.
Yeah, right. There's my mug. There's my mug. Through the chair. Okay, yeah. So it goes to the specific department. So getting counselor to be able to view those, we would have to view every department then, because all the complaints are not specific to just one department. So I could see where there'd be a challenge there. But I do believe we still have to figure out a way to to be able to get in there and maybe once we do get this new software, my other fear would be counselors getting in there and being able to edit. And I think that might be a problem where you're editing comments and stuff. So I really hope we can come to resolve because I think it'd be better for us as counselors. And I think it'd take a little bit of more workload, maybe not so much workload, but we'd be able to help and assist maybe more with the reports. Like every day I'm getting someone saying, I sent the report in. I'm not getting back. No one's getting back. Not in every case, but they're not getting back to me. And I'll say, well, can you give me the number? And they'll say, no, I'm done this road already. I'm not giving you the number. Tell someone to get this resolved and that's kind of the biggest challenge.
I have Counselor Mady, Counselor Beek, and finish up with Mayor Bondi.
Through your chair. Yeah, the reporter problem, I think it's a great tool. I think it's been working well. Lately with the added officers, it seems to be even better. Imagine you're just able to get out to more of them now. Or I have two groups of people, the ones that want to be anonymous, be totally anonymous. And I understand that. And I usually offer them that choice to call in. Nobody will. But then I have the other group that wants to make the complaint. They want to make everybody know that they're making the complaint. And for those ones, I would really like to see something really simple for them that we can all see when they make that complaint, like to follow up easier on. Because yeah, sometimes when we ask for the number, either they don't get the number or it was too late, or then when they do give us the number, we'll have the problem where 2 or 3 of us by that point are working on the same problem and taking up, staff time and everything. So some way where those ones that want to make the complaint, while everybody knows the complaint, if there's could be like an easy button for them to push and then we're all notified or something along those lines, I think that would clear up a whole bunch of it.
You, Chair. Yep. So great topic. Again, I've said before, I'm really grateful for this tool. It is still kind of new to us, and I'm really glad that you're shopping out new softwares that hopefully are affordable and we can implement some of them. But I think you've heard over and over loud and resounding from all of us on tonight and other times, some of the features that we hope that we can get. So I'm glad this is still a work in progress. And I heard other counselors say they feel like sometimes residents, when we ask them to use report a problem, the residents sort of feel like we're fluffing them off. And I do as much as I can to make them, feel like you are being heard. I'm telling you, this is your best recourse. This is what's going to help you get to a solution the fastest. This is a new tool. You've got to use it. But I'd like to hear from other counselors, if any of you come up with any quick fixes or fast replies, because I often have had residents feel like I'm just brushing them off. Like, yeah, I just want to get off the phone. And truly it is the best way to get a resolution for their problem. So if any of you have better comebacks to let me know.
Mayor Bondi.
It certainly is a work in progress, and I understand the comments that Councillor McGuire-Blaise is making, and I totally believe that when we tell residents to enter the report a problem themselves, they have, I often get, well, it's the look like I pay you to do that. So, and part of that is probably self-inflicted from before, but anyways, one of the things that I've learned to do is I start an Excel spreadsheet, and I really right away, I'll sit there with the resident and I'll say, pull it up, put your name, put your number in there and give me the confirmation number right away. And I feel like it gives the residents like a sense of like responsibility right then and there. Then I write down the confirmation number. And a lot of times it is fixed, but for the ones that aren't, I have it already there and I'm like, hey, I'm with you. Like, I want this solved too. Like, we're all on the same team. The other thing that I'll do is if somebody will come out, like there's a couple that came out to the coffee with us, and they wrote their issue on there, but they put their phone number and they put their email. I fill it out as if I'm them. and then they get the email. And then I'll call them later and I'll say, did you get the email? Okay, that's what, your confirmation number that, you follow up with me now if in a couple weeks. So I will do that. And seniors, some seniors don't want to do it at all. They don't have email, they don't have it. So I will say, please call town hall and then call and ask. A lot of people, I think when they call town hall, they don't ask for a confirmation number. I think they just call it in. So I think we need to ask our residents when they call town hall to get a confirmation number so we can take that, because I would say probably 1 out of every 10, there's a miscommunication somewhere. So that's when I call CAO suite and have them look at those. But yeah, I think it's a good start, but we definitely need some improvements.
Good conversation. We have heard loud and clear. This has been raised a number of times. I can tell you for administration, we appreciate that council is pushing residents to there and the system is being used. We realize we're using an antiquated system that's not meeting our needs now. So we are looking at that. It will be in your budget. And if you feel it's important, we'll see how that proceeds. Moving forward to our next topic, and I'm not sure if that was already covered or if it's different, but bylaw enforcement, Councilor McGuire, please.
Thank you, through chair. I would just like to make note for the last one. If we could find a system that you can search by the confirmation code or a resident's name or the resident's address. Just because sometimes the issue will come up in multiple years at the same address. So if we could just pull it up and see what happened last year to have an idea of where this is going, that'd be great. As for bylaw, it really did have something, it really did go hand in hand with my reporter problem. So the only other thing I would like to add is I would like to see, and I'm not sure where council goes, which is why I brought it up here, how we feel about right now bylaw only enforces if it's reported. So if it's complained upon. But I have an issue with the vacant properties with tall grasses, with the vacant commercial buildings with signage on them. And I don't think that we should have to report it every single time the grass gets too high. I think it should be something that we just do. So that's really where I would like to see a little bit more preventative bylaw in that regard, as opposed to wait until it's reported, because there's multiple properties along Highway 3 that are vacant. The grass is ridiculous. And there's a development right next to me, and the grass is so ridiculous that people are now dumping trash. So instead of us just waiting for someone to finally get fed up with it and report it, for those instances, can we just enforce it?
Previous councils, basically council sets a level of service, right? And we'll go by that. So past councils asked us to enforce, be more proactive, and our bylaw went out and did that. And then when the resident came and complained to a council or council members, then they came back and asked us to waive so if council wants to set a level of service for that, we definitely can do that, as long as we get that support. I'm not sure if Mr. Carter, any other comments or, okay. Deputy Mayor Shepley.
Yeah, I kind of concur with the long grass issue. I think it's one we see. It's in Harrow, it's in Essex Center. We see it regularly. I'm just wondering, that would be one I would be supportive of. I don't necessarily think they got to go out and look in everybody's backyard for things to enforce, but certain ones like the long grass would be something I would be in support of. And I do want to say that, I've dealt with a couple of our bylaw officers, our new ones, met with them on a few occasions. They're fantastic. They're doing a great job. And I hope we continue to utilize their efforts. It's doing good work out there. And that would be one area, just really the tall grass. I don't know. I'm not necessarily, the signage doesn't bother me as much as the tall grass does. I guess it's especially what Rodney and I went out for a ride, prior to the Harrow Fair, and there's some long grass around the businesses around that area too. It's something that, I don't know why they don't take care of it themselves, but maybe a little nudge from bylaw would help.
Mayor Bondi. Oh, Mr. Carter.
Touch on that tall grass. I can assure you, all these commercial properties that have been spoken of, we have cut, except that one, that subdivision. We've had a lot of rain this year. And on the same token, when we go to cut these, We try to contact the owners. These are large properties. On average, they're $4,000 to $8,000 per cutting. And we submit that bill. They pay it, or if they don't pay it, we put on the taxes. We deal with the repercussions of that argument each and every time. We don't want to go heavy on them. This has been a very abnormal summer with the rain events. Times we have scheduled to go in for the second cutting, we can't even get in there because it's too wet and so forth. The grass is growing like weeds. Just staying on top of it and the expenditure of cleaning this, we're trying to find a happy medium. With that specific subdivision, we had the proponent or developer cut around the perimeter abutting the residential because there's so many stub ups in that subdivision in terms of clean outs, curb stops, iron bars, so forth. It's hard for a maintenance crew to get in there without damaging their equipment. That's just to enlighten some of the issues we have at our end as well. That's it.
I'm definitely all for the proactive blitzes for bylaw property standards. And that's one of the reasons I think we hired the new 2 part-time bylaw officers, was to help be more proactive. So that was like a substantial move by this council because it had budgetary implications. Something that I do want to see more bylaw on, and also, like, I'll be walking downtown and I'll see something and I don't really want to enter a report a problem either. Like, I'm walking, like, I have pictures on my phone. I probably have reporter problems on my phone right now, but I don't really want to do it because I feel like it should be done because I need to like book 2 hours to do these reporter problems. Things like when people stick yard sale signs on telephone poles, or, you know, missing dog signs, you know, that get faded, or it doesn't, I like dogs. I want to find all the dogs that are missing, but you know what I mean? It's people litter our downtown with signs and it just makes it horrible. So I think now we're going to have 2 beautiful ends of downtown. We need to like make sure that they stay pretty. One thing that I think we can monitor this term of council is, I think we get every 3 months. Is it every 3 months or every 6 months we get a report on our bylaw complaints every 6? So that's something that we can start to see, like with the onboarding of the new 2 part-time officers, we should hopefully see the proactive going up and up and up, which is my hope, because I agree. Thank you.
You, Chair Sweet. So when we're talking level of service, this is one that I want to make sure I got right. There's been quite a few times where people have been complaining about an issue, parking or something, and they call the OPP. The OPP comes out and doesn't ticket the person, even though they're parked illegally. And then it comes back, and then we have to go through our bylaw, and then our bylaw finally, but then we have to make sure that they're parking at the time when our bylaw was there, and they went out and issued the ticket. Is the OPP supposed to be issuing tickets for our people? Like when I say call the OPP when it's after hours, is that still okay?
That is correct. The non-emergency number, the OPP, should be addressing issues. We've had in the past, kind of going by your example, if that's the case, I do ask that you let me know, because we do follow up, be it at police service board, or I have monthly meetings with the staff sergeant to discuss those. So yes, they are. Our bylaw has helped in terms of addressing some of those, but when our bylaw is not on, the police are to provide that support.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, there's lots within bylaw enforcement, but property standard concerns, those are no brainers. It really goes back to Councilor McGuire Blaze, which was talking earlier about selling Essex. I mean, when I see these properties, and grass is just one of the bylaw areas, but you see the long grass and stuff, it all goes back to that kind of stuff, right? Proactive versus being reactive. Like I'm constantly defending our police and our enforcement, but when we're reactive, we're saying, well, this is how it works. They're not just going to drive around and look for it. They might drive by your house every day and see you're illegally parked, you're this, but if you really want them to write a ticket, you got to call and complain. That kind of doesn't really, they go, well, aren't they paid just to do the job and write the ticket? And then they get the ticket and they get mad about it, right? So, but let's talk about level of service. How are we defining level of service and specifically? So when we tell residents, well, if you want that particular enforcement, you have to pay for that level of service. And they say, well, we pay a lot of taxes. I thought that should be part of that. So how do we as counselors put a definition on what level of service for bylaw, like what? So if we say next year, let's throw 100,000 more into bylaw, so what does that get us extra? I mean, they're actually gonna go and drive around and get more tickets? So I think I struggle with the level of service part.
When I'm talking level of service, and you touched on it, Councillor Guerin, it's basically the funds that we're going to put in for that level of service. So in the past, we've had one full-time bylaw officer, right? We all know the size of our municipality. I believe we have over 200 bylaws. I could be wrong. We have a number of bylaws.
21.
Oh, so I was way off, 21. But it's when I talk about level of service, just like we did, as Mayor Bonnie said, we put in part-time, right? We increase that level of service to be more reactive or more proactive. So when I talk about level of service, it's where do you want to put your dollars to get visible level of service? In this case, bylaw, they want to see more bylaw enforcement.
Follow up on that. So, but because we hire one or two more part-timers or one full-timer, that's helping us with the complaints we're getting of the day, whether it be down the beach, whether it be speeding. But it doesn't necessarily mean they're actively going out and trying to write more tickets or make sure that people are following the bylaws. So I want to know, how do we have a discussion on what level of service council wants and compared to what we have? Like, I know it's a slippery slope just saying get out there and write all kinds of tickets, but I really feel like in many cases, whether it's from OPP enforcement or even bylaw, let's just pick on OPP for a while. I mean, whether you're parked illegally in a subdivision or you're parked or you're making legal left turns, they're not writing the tickets. And I don't understand why they're not writing or why they're just ignoring it and driving by every day and waiting for that complaint.
To your question, Councillor Guerin, for council, this is where we have those conversations, right? And then from that, if there's further action, we could come up with a funding model to add more bylaw in our budget, and council decides, do we want to add more staff to do more bylaw enforcement? So when to have those conversations, exactly what we're doing now, it is good conversation. Anything else on bylaw, Deputy Mayor Shepley?
Eric, just one quick question, just because we keep talking about parking, I'm going to put bylaw on the spot. When you receive a complaint about parking infractions, and you get another one and another one, are those investigated every time, or if you get several in one area, do they just I'm just curious how often you guys would address it when you get a call for a bylaw parking? So if a particular neighbor called 12 times in a week, do we send an officer out 12 times, or does he just go on occasion?
We don't get many parking complaints during business hours. Most of the complaints are in the evening or weekends, which time the OPP would enforce that. If it's now that we're more proactive with after hours bylaw officers, we do react to that same evening or on the weekend. But if I could just add, being proactive, there's a lot of good to it, but there's a lot of bad as well. Previous councils I've dealt with over 30 years, we've mandated with protocol being proactive. And I've had this council chamber full people and council directing bylaw, tone it down. So there's both ways that you'll get complaints. With proactive, you get complaints as well.
I was, just so I'm clear, I wasn't trying to suggest that they will go out actively looking for parking violators, but I just was curious when a complaint, because I've gotten a few calls from the same resident time and time again about parking, and I'm, to be honest, I'm at my wit's end with it. I don't know what the answer is for the certain situations, and I was just curious if so that I could have information so that I know how often that we are reactive, if we're not reactive to that call, not necessarily looking for it. Thank you.
Chadwick and Mayor Bonnie will have the last word on this topic.
You CEO Sweet, just to go back on the topic of level of service, if I may. So council had directed us to, or approved rather, the hiring of 2 part-time bylaw officers. we have that flexibility in the contracts, or rather the employment contracts, full-time, of course, to be able to have these folks, our team members, work throughout the evenings and the weekends, but also overlap during the days. The improvement in the level of service that you can speak to your constituents would, I think what we would say and suggest is that there is a lot more presence at special events. They are available to work with OPP during evenings and weekends when noise and parking complaints are received, or even complaints for STRs. So that, I think, is the increase in that level of service that I think is what council directed us to do, to be more present during evenings and weekends, to be present at special events, and to work with OPP. And how that happens, and I may have mentioned it, I think, at a past council meeting, the OPP receives our part-time bylaw officers' schedules a month and a half in advance. So they have knowledge of exactly when our part-time staff are on duty. Case in point, this past weekend, a noise complaint was received, hopped on the phone, and our bylaw was dispatched. So that is, I believe, that I think that important note for our residents to know that there has been an increase in our level of service during evenings and weekends and special events. Thank you.
I just want to encourage council members and members of the public to read the police service board minutes when they're on our agenda, because during the last police service board meeting, the town of Essex, our top call for service was neighbor dispute. So I've never seen that, but it seems to kind of be creeping up, neighbor versus neighbor. So just something to point out is sometimes when the bylaw goes out, they won't go out without the OPP. It's getting to that situation in some of our case in point areas. And even animal control, we have a handful of places where animal control won't go out without OPP or bylaws. So we have some really, I don't know, lack of better words, repeat offenders that are taking up a lot of time and resources too. So I think we need to take that into consideration as well. Thank you.
We're actually right on schedule, going into our last topic, bee pollinator locations from Councillor Verbeek.
Thanks, through you, Chair. Yep, I brought it up before. Just want to keep it on everybody's radar that, you know, whenever the town is doing gardens or making additions to the aesthetics of any town properties, that we consider looking at creating spaces that are beneficial to our pollinators. By using native plants, there's a lot of benefits to, you know, aiding our pollinators, but there's also substantial savings, I understand too, because it's not nearly as costly to have like a native garden as it is to put all the money into annuals, although the annuals are beautiful. And don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting for a minute that we, you know, that we do these type of spaces on our new streetscapes in our downtowns, and we do have some, and I'm hoping that through this conversation, maybe Mark or some can put out there some information on where the ones that we have are, because I didn't even know we had one at John R. Park until our tour director pointed it out to us and said, you know, how grateful they were to have it. And I asked the question, have you noticed an increase in your pollinators and your butterflies and your bees since putting the garden in? And she said, absolutely, 100-fold, that they were, it was very effective in what it was created for. But I thought it was kind of beautiful too, even though typically other pollinator gardens, like my big one in my backyard, aren't always, they look messy. So I'm just hoping that I just want to keep it on the radar that moving forward, we can always consider that when we're making new garden spaces. And if we could get out, educate people where they all are, because I don't even know where they all are in the town.
Maybe Director Morissette can kind of speak to where we have some now and some potential locations in the future.
Thank you, CEO Sweet. So yeah, we are looking at having, as part of the community services master plan, I did ensure that was going to be an area of focus as one of the large recommendations. So we should see that in the next couple months when we start looking at that. So it's also on our team's radar to continue to evaluate some of the areas. So we do have a large area at the back of Pollard Park. It's the Butterfly Garden in Harrow. So that is one of the larger areas. We do have a couple other ones, but one area that I've been working with staff on is we have quite a bit of surface area at the Harrow Soccer Complex right now. So if you remember when we were going on the driveway towards the back of the retention ponds, there were two berms on the right-hand side going into it. So we might be able to put those whole things as butterfly gardens, which would be quite a surface area. Again, benefit to what you just said is there would be a cost savings because we wouldn't have to maintain that grassland as well. So it would be mutually beneficial. There would be a little bit of an upfront cost to actually get the pollinator seeds in there to be able to plant it, but we'd want to rope it off and mark it with signage so that people know that it's a pollinator garden, don't go in there. And also so our staff doesn't just go, oh, this is long, let's go cut it. So we do want them to be aware of all that stuff as well. But just to further mention, the pollinators, when we do our yearly plantings, our baskets and our beds and all that stuff, those plants do get off pollen as well. So it is beneficial in our downtown cores and our areas throughout that we have those as well.
Thanks. Thanks, Jake. That's awesome because like, especially long paths, like you're saying, the berm along the Harrow. So some of the other things that some of the proponents for pollinator gardens had given me in the past were that like, save anytime you save on the grass cuttings, you're helping the environment with, because of the effects of cutting the grass and the fuel. I've seen it go so far as municipalities that just give out seeds and throw them everywhere. And so that's not what I'm suggesting, but I'm glad that you're looking at at doing more of these. And I don't see why we don't have a big one out front town hall.
Thank you, Sierra Sweet. So one area that I forgot to mention was the rain garden in front of the Harrow Arena one. So we do have to take in mind and plan strategically where these are located. We don't want them in necessarily in high traffic walkway areas because you can have additional bugs. So we do have to take that into consideration. We're trying to be very strategic with our horticulture staff to make sure that they're in the appropriate locations wherever we do choose to put those.
Here, I was wondering if the berms around the lagoons would be a spot that would be adequate for that, or maybe there's another issue that environmentally or something that would impact it.
Through the chair. That's a good question. I honestly don't have an answer for you at this time. It's something that we can definitely take a look at and explore.
Councillor Rubik. Deputy Mayor Shepley.
Through the chair, through Councillor Verbik's No Mow May initiative, she was talking about it. Lured me to talk to I happen to have a brother-in-law who's in one of the larger bee supply honey producers in the province, and he gave me a link to the Ontario Pollinator Health Action Plan, which I just forwarded to you. I actually forgot to send that out to you and to Kim for your information. One of the things he did say though that was important, and I don't know that we do, is he had suggested that if we're spraying the ditch banks in the town or the county, that probably does more damage than any mowing that we could possibly do. So I don't know if we do any pesticide spraying at all or not, or if the county does.
Through the chair. So like the ditch banks, we spray like an herbicide, but not a pesticide. So if you're talking about like specifically for like to protect against insects, we don't do that in ditch banks.
Questions on this topic? Okay, before I pass it over to a clerk, I do want to thank everybody for our first committee of the whole meeting. As you can kind of see what the format is, we'll have this probably another 2.5 months. I'll send out for agenda items, or if any meetings you have with agenda items, please forward them to me so we can add them to the list. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Director Malandrucolo.
So with regard to matters arising from the committee of the whole, through the chair, I can report that there were no specific recommendations from administration to council at this time, and that's the extent of my report.
So I need a mover and a seconder to receive the report of the presiding officer of the committee of the whole and that council adopt the noted recommendations of the committee of the whole. Deputy Mayor Shepley, supported by Councillor Mady. Any questions? Seeing none, all in favor, needing a mover and a seconder for adjournment. Councillor Verbeek, Councillor Guerin, all in favor? Okay, have a good evening and see you in 5 minutes.